Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Hope you're doing well. So the time to get prepared for major economic disruptions may be coming to a close. Based on comments made earlier today by President Biden, it appears that we may be just hours or days away from a U.S. or Israeli strike on Iranian oil infrastructure. Now, currently, the U.S. is already experiencing some fairly significant economic disruptions in the wake of a major natural disaster in the form of Hurricane Helene, and also as a result of supply chain disruptions related to the ongoing port workers strike. But I've got to tell you that the current situation will look like child's play compared to the potential fallout from a strike on Iran, the world's seventh largest producer of petroleum. So we'll get into some of the potential consequences here, and I'll also give you an update on some commodities, silver and oil specifically, because those are going to be the ones to watch as this plays out. So let's get to it. Before we get into the news today, I do want to say a big thank you for tuning into today's video. If you enjoy it and you get some value from it, please do give it a big thumbs up down below. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to the channel? Did you know SD Bullion is giving away a monster box of 2024 Tree of Life silver coins? Sign up today at sdbullion.com/sweepstakes. Okay, so by now you are probably all aware of the large missile strike from Iran on Israel this past Tuesday. Iran launched about 180 missiles, and based on the footage that we have seen from the ground in Israel, this strike was significantly more effective than the previous strikes that we witnessed back in April, with a number of the missiles penetrating Israeli air defenses and damaging targets on the ground. So now we find ourselves in this situation where we are awaiting the response from Israel and from the IDF to these missile strikes. Now, there's a variety of ways they could respond. Thus far, one of the things we have heard from President Biden is that Israel should not strike Iranian nuclear sites. However, he has indicated that he views a reprisal attack by Israel as being justified. So what might this strike look like? Well, one of the ideas that's been floated is targeting Iranian oil infrastructure. And when questioned earlier today if he would support Israel striking Iran's oil facilities, President Biden's response was, quote, "We are discussing that." Now, when Biden made this comment, the price of crude oil jumped. It is trading up over 5% at the time I am recording this video, up 5% on the day. But if we do witness a strike on Iranian oil facilities, this 5% move will just be the beginning. There will be a huge spike in global energy prices if there is a successful attack on Iranian oil fields or on their oil refinery infrastructure. Iran is the third largest producer of petroleum in OPEC. They are the seventh biggest producer in the world. They produce over 4 million barrels of oil per day, much of which is exported to China, sort of circumventing many of the sanctions on Iranian energy. So you think about this, China is getting cheap oil from Iran. If you blow up those facilities, that's going to mean that gets cut off. So there are some significant geopolitical implications to any strike on Iran's facilities. But it doesn't matter where the oil is going. The crude oil market worldwide, it's a global market. So a major reduction in supply, and 4 million barrels a day is quite a bit. That's a good percentage of global oil production. That could send prices absolutely skyrocketing. But it's not just about that 4 million barrels of oil that are produced in Iran per day. Much of the risk to global supply chains and the global energy market comes from the proximity of Iran to the critical Strait of Hormuz. Now, this is a report from Iran International regarding what some of the hardliners in Iran have been calling for. Now, this was published prior to Tuesday's missile strike, so keep that in mind for context. But one of the things they've been calling for is the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. This is a quote from an ultra-Iranian hardliner from Twitter. It says, "Why can Yemen block the main passageway of oil, but we are not doing the same in the Strait of Hormuz?" Another one of these hardliners tweeted, "Iran's first step should be closing this strategic passageway to prevent an all-out war in the region." Now, I don't necessarily agree that closing this waterway would prevent an all-out regional war. In fact, it would probably be a major escalation, because there's no way that the U.S. and its allies are just going to sit idly by while Iran tries to choke off global energy markets. And something like 20% of global oil production flows through the Strait of Hormuz every day. So it's much more than just Iran's production. Here's a story from the Tradewinds Global Shipping News Journal. Now, this is behind a paywall, so I don't have the full story here, but the headline is Iran closure of Hormuz Strait would be even worse for tanker shipping than the Red Sea crisis. Shutting down the Strait of Hormuz would have huge implications for global energy markets, and this is one of the steps that Iran could take in retaliation to strikes on its oil infrastructure. Now, returning to this report and the other things that the Iranian hardliners are calling for, one of them is the creation of nuclear weapons. This is a quote from Sohrab Salahi. He is a hardline radical university professor, according to this report. I mean, I'm not really familiar with the guy, but that's how they're characterizing him. And he says this: whether we like it or not, Iran must direct its military doctrine towards building a nuclear bomb. Iran has wasted the cards it held in the past, and the only card that it holds now is a nuclear bomb. This is the only means to bring the West to the negotiation table. And you can guarantee that if Iranian oil infrastructure is hit by military strikes, then these calls for the creation of an Iranian nuclear weapon are only going to get louder. We know that Iran has large amounts of refined uranium. They're only a few steps away from building a bomb. And if they start to see their oil infrastructure targeted, they may view this as being the only way to deter such attacks. And this is critically important, especially in light of the wording of House Resolution 559. You might recall this from last November when this bill was passed. The gist of which is that if Iran builds a nuclear weapon, we're going to war with them. This bill can be summarized in these 4 points: that a nuclear Islamic Republic of Iran is not acceptable, that Iran must not be able to obtain a nuclear weapon under any circumstances or conditions, to use all means necessary to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, and to recognize and support the freedom of action of partners and allies, including Israel, to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. So you can see how an attack on an Iranian oil strike could quickly escalate into all-out war, especially with Iranian hardliners already calling for the creation of nuclear weapons. Now, one of the latest updates here from Al Jazeera is that Iran has now warned of, quote, unconventional response in the case of a new Israeli attack. Now, this unconventional response seems to be in reference to some kind of an attack on Israeli infrastructure. Could that be a cyber attack? Could it be something more ominous? Who knows? But clearly the escalation and brinksmanship are being brought to a new level here. Now, meanwhile, in the U.S., and if the Strait of Hormuz gets shut down, if we see skyrocketing oil prices, or if the U.S. gets drawn directly into a war with Iran, the economic consequences will be absolutely tremendous here in the U.S. I mean, we're talking shortages, we're talking potential civil disorder, we're talking rampaging inflation. If you think the Federal Reserve can unleash a lot of price hikes with their printing of easy money, yeah, that's true. But, cut off the global supply of oil, but to the tune of 20%. And that's a whole other ball game. Now, here in the U.S., we're having some interesting issues recently as well. I wanted to touch on this. Bank of America yesterday, where customers were reporting account outages, people were seeing zero balances. This is important because, this is what is occurring here in our financial system in the best of times. Allegedly, this is just a glitch and not the result of some malign actor. So, if you have problems like this now, imagine how things could become if we are openly at war with a country like Iran. The risk of a major cyber attack persists, and you need to prepare yourself for that. We are already seeing panic buying for toilet paper, reportedly. I mean, this just reeks of 2020 and some of the crazy reactions we saw there. But the reason I bring this up, because if people are already panic buying toilet paper due to simply a workers' strike, a dock worker strike, imagine how they're going to react when the cost of gas goes up by a factor of 2 or 3, or there simply isn't any to buy, or we enter into a global trade war. It is going to get ugly. So you need to make sure you have cash on hand. You want to have hard assets outside of the financial system in your own control. You need to have a means to defend yourself in case the very social fabric comes under major stress as a result of these events. And you need to have essentials. You need to have water filtration. You need to have food. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with our existing systems of support should these events play out. Now, before we wrap things up today, let's take a look at silver and how it reacted to this news today. So the price of crude oil up 5%, silver up as well, a little under 1% today, back over the $32 level. And earlier this week, I put out a video where I mentioned that there was a potential for a sell-off in silver going into the end of the week. And I still think that that is potentially in the cards. Tomorrow we get the non-farm payroll data from September. And if that comes out very strong, I think the expectation is the addition of 150,000 jobs. If we get a number much stronger than that, you could still, I think, see a sell-off in gold and silver. That'll largely be related to the anticipation of Fed monetary policy. But I do think it's important to point out that, if Israel or the U.S. strikes Iranian oil facilities, that thesis is out the window. And I don't think we're going to see a pullback in gold or silver at all, regardless of what kind of economic data we're presented with. If this attack actually goes through, I think all of these safe haven assets are going to go through the roof. But we'll have to see. Keep an eye out tomorrow morning for the non-farm payroll data. If it does come out very positive and you have set some powder aside and we do get a sell-off in gold and silver, I would view that as a tremendous buying opportunity, especially in light of the geopolitical environment we find ourselves in. Any dips in gold and silver and opportunities to get into these hard assets, I think should be taken advantage of. Not financial advice, but just telling you what I will be looking at doing. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Stay safe and happy stacking, everyone. Smart Silver Stacker, out.